The ship came out of nowhere. One moment the sky above New York was clear and blue and full of morning sunlight. And the next moment there was something massive hanging in the clouds. Something that blocked out the sun and cast a shadow over half of Manhattan. People stopped in the streets and looked up. Their phones forgotten in their hands, their coffee growing cold, their hearts beating fast with fear and wonder. The ship was not like anything humans had built, not like anything humans had even imagined. And it hung there in the sky like a question that nobody knew how to answer within an hour. Every military base on Earth was on high alert. Every satellite was pointed at the visitor. Every government was holding emergency meetings. And every news channel was showing the same image over and over again. The alien ship above New York City. Ambassador Sirithka watched the human broadcasts from inside her vessel and felt something she had not felt in many years. Something that her people called the flutter of desperate hope. She had traveled across 3,000 light years to reach this small blue planet, had burned through fuel reserves that her dying civilization could not spare, had risked everything on a species that the rest of the galaxy considered to be little more than clever animals, but she had no other choice. The Harrow Swarm had already consumed 17 of her worlds, had already killed billions of her people, had already turned great cities into dust and great fleets into debris. And nothing in the known galaxy had been able to stop them. Nothing, except maybe these strange creatures called human Sirithkai, had studied them for months before making her journey, had read every report that the Galactic Concord had compiled about Earth and its inhabitants. And what she had found had confused her deeply. Humans were young, barely 18 years into their space age, barely a blink of an eye by galactic standards. And yet they had already done things that older species had never attempted. They had split the atom and walked on their moon and built machines that could think. All within a single century, all while fighting wars among themselves and nearly destroying their own planet. They were chaotic and contradictory and completely unpredictable. And that was exactly what Sirithka needed. The United Nations agreed to meet with her 3 days after her arrival. 3 days of tense negotiations conducted through radio signals and written messages. 3 days of humanity trying to figure out if she was a threat or a friend. When she finally descended to the surface in a smaller shuttle, when she finally stepped out onto human soil and breathed human air, she found herself surrounded by soldiers with weapons pointed at her chest. She did not blame them for their caution. She would have done the same. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo met her at the entrance to the General Assembly Hall, a tall woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake. And Sirithka felt the flutter of hope grow stronger. Ambassador, the Secretary General said, "Welcome to Earth. We have many questions for you, and I have answers." Sirithka replied through her translator device, "But first, I must ask something of you. Something that may sound strange coming from a species you have never met. I must ask for your help." The General Assembly was packed with delegates from every nation on Earth. Hundreds of humans in their formal clothing, hundreds of faces showing fear and curiosity and suspicion. And Sirithka stood before them all and told them about the end of the galaxy. She told them about the Harrow Swarm, about the billions of biomechanical creatures that moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in their path, converting planets into more of themselves, leaving nothing behind but empty darkness. She told them about the 43 civilizations that the swarm had destroyed, about species that had existed for millions of years being wiped out in decades, about great empires falling silent one by one. She told them about her own people, the Valoran Collective, who had been explorers and scientists and artists for 12,000 years, and who were now refugees fleeing from world to world, always one step ahead of the hunger that followed them. "We have tried everything," she said, her voice breaking with emotion that the translator could not hide. We have tried weapons, and we have tried barriers, and we have tried hiding, and we have tried running. And nothing works. Nothing stops them. Nothing even slows them down. The assembly was silent. The Galactic Concord has given up on us, she continued. The other species have decided that the swarm cannot be defeated, that the only option is to stay out of its path and hope that it turns in another direction. But my people are in that path, my children are in that path, and I cannot accept that there is no hope. Secretary General Okonkwo leaned forward in her seat. Ambassador, we are honored by your trust in us, but I must be honest with you. We are the youngest species in the galaxy. Our technology is primitive compared to yours. Our military is small. Our experience in space is limited. What could we possibly offer that the great civilizations of the Concord could not? Sirithke had expected this question. She had prepared her answer carefully. I do not ask for your ships or your weapons, she said. I do not ask for your soldiers or your resources. I ask for something far more valuable. Something that the Concord has watched you demonstrate again and again since you first reached the stars. What is that? Your minds. A murmur went through the assembly. The Concord has been observing humanity for 18 years, Sirithka explained. And in that time you have done things that no other species has done. You have solved problems in ways that no other species would consider. You have looked at impossible situations and found possibilities that were invisible to everyone else. She paused and let her words sink in. You think differently than we do, than any of us do, and that difference frightens us. It disturbs us. It makes us uncomfortable. But right now it is my only hope. The Secretary General was quiet for a long moment. What exactly are you asking us to do? She finally said, I am asking you to look at the Harrow Swarm, to study them, to learn everything about them, and then to do what humans do best, which is, Sirithke felt the flutter in her chest become something stronger, something that might have been the beginning of real hope, find a way to win. General Marcus Chun had seen many strange things in his 40 years of military service, but nothing had prepared him for the war council that assembled in the bunker. Beneath the Swiss Alps, there were admirals and generals from 12 different nations. Men and women who had spent their lives preparing for human wars, not galactic ones. And they sat around the central table with expressions of grim determination. But they were not alone. Scattered among the military commanders were people who had no business being in a war room. People who had been brought in because someone somewhere had decided that conventional thinking would not be enough. There was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying alien life forms and who now found herself studying the greatest predator the galaxy had ever known. There was Professor Samuel Wright, a game theorist from Princeton who had written papers about decision-making in complex systems and who now had to apply his theories to an enemy that had never lost a game. There were 3 science fiction authors who had been flown in from different continents because someone had read their books and thought they might have useful ideas. There was a video game designer who had created simulations of alien invasions and who now realized that his imaginary enemies were nothing compared to the real thing. There was a professor of insect behavior who had studied swarm intelligence in bees and ants and locusts, and who saw disturbing similarities in the Harrow data. And there was a 9-year-old girl named Mei Lin, attending through a holographic connection from her home in Singapore, her parents hovering nervously behind her, because she had won 3 international chess championships, and someone had decided that her pattern recognition skills might be valuable. General Chum looked around the room and wondered if he was leading a war council or a circus. But he had read the Velaran data, had seen the images of the Harrow Swarm, had watched the recordings of plants being consumed, and he knew that normal strategies would not work. The enemy was displayed on every wall of the room, billions of creatures, each one the size of a small car, each one a perfect fusion of organic matter and advanced technology. Moving through space in waves that stretched across millions of kilometers, they communicated through quantum entanglement, thinking as one mind across distances that should have made coordination impossible, reacting to threats with perfect unity. Adapting their formations in microseconds, she had no leaders that could be assassinated, no supply lines that could be cut, no homeworld that could be targeted, no weakness that 43 previous civilizations had been able to find. Let me make sure I understand the situation, General Chun said, his voice cutting through the nervous chatter of the room. We are facing an enemy that outnumbers us by a factor of about 1,000,000,000 to 1. That has technology far beyond ours, that has never been defeated in the entire history of the galaxy. And that is currently heading toward Velaran space at a speed that will bring them to the first inhabited world in approximately 14 months. The room was silent. Does anyone have good news? Dr. Tanaka raised her hand. I might have something, General, but I am not sure if it counts as good news or just interesting news. At this point, I will take anything. The xenobiologist stood and walked to the main display, pulling up data charts that meant nothing to most of the people in the room. The Harrow Swarm is perfect, she said. And I mean that literally, they have been studied by hundreds of species over thousands of years. And everyone agrees that their strategy is optimal. Their coordination is flawless. Their efficiency is absolute. That sounds like bad news. It would be. Except for one thing. Dr. Tanaka turned to face the room. They have never needed to adapt every weapon that has ever been used against them. They have overwhelmed through sheer numbers every strategy that has ever been tried against them. They have countered through perfect coordination every trap that has ever been set for them. They have avoided through collective intelligence. She paused to let her words sink in. They do not learn because they have never had to learn. They do not innovate because innovation has never been necessary. They do not change because change has never been required. So they are predictable. Colonel Rivera said from across the table, completely. Given any tactical situation, we can model with 99.7% accuracy exactly what they will do. The problem is that what they do works and has always worked against every enemy they have ever faced. The 9-year-old chess champion raised her hand, and the room fell silent because she had already solved 3 problems that the adults had been stuck on. They are like a chess computer, Maylin said, her young voice clear and confident. They always make the best move. But the best move is only the best move if you are playing chess. General Chun stared at her. What do you mean? My teacher told me about a game between a human grandmaster and a computer. The computer was much stronger. It could calculate millions of moves per second. It should have won easily, but the grandmaster did something strange. It made moves that looked bad, moves that the computer did not understand. And the computer did not know how to respond because it had never seen anything like it. Did the grandmaster win? No, Mei Lin admitted. But he lasted much longer than he should have. And he found weaknesses in the computer that nobody knew existed. The room erupted and discussion ideas flew back and forth. Some brilliant and some crazy and some that were probably both at the same time. Someone suggested creating a black hole to swallow the swarm. Someone else suggested a virus that could disrupt their quantum communication. A third person asked if anyone had simply tried talking to them. General Chun stood in the middle of the chaos and watched the swarm patterns on the display. Watching the perfect coordination, the flawless efficiency, the absolute predictability, and slowly an idea began to form in his mind. Everyone quiet, he said. And the room fell silent. We've been thinking about this wrong. We've been trying to find a way to beat them at their game. Trying to find a weapon strong enough or a strategy clever enough. But that is what everyone else has tried. And everyone else has failed. He walked to the display and pointed at the swarm patterns. Dr. Tanaka is right. They are perfect and they are predictable. That means we know exactly what they will do in any situation. We know how they will react to any attack. We know how they will respond to any threat. He turned to face the room. We do not need to defeat the swarm. We need to make the swarm defeat itself. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Mei Lin smiled. Stop playing chess, she said. General Chun nodded. Stop playing chess. The plan was called Operation Looking Glass. And when Ambassador Sirithka first read the details, she thought the humans had gone completely insane. She sat in her quarters aboard the diplomatic station orbiting Earth, her bioluminescent skin cycling through colors that had no translation in any human language. Patterns of shock and disbelief, and something that might have been the beginning of terror. You want to lure them, she said to the holographic image of General Chun. You want to deliberately attract the Harrow Swarm to a specific location. Yes, to the Karath Nebula. Yes, which is surrounded by 3 inhabited star systems containing a combined population of approximately 800 million people. Yes, Sirithka stared at the human general and tried to understand what she was seeing in her experience, which stretched back over 2 centuries of diplomatic service. No species had ever deliberately drawn the swarm toward populated space. The very idea was madness. It was suicide. It was the kind of plan that only someone with no understanding of the enemy would propose, General Chun. She said carefully, I came to Earth because I believe that humans think differently than other species. I did not realize that you think so differently that you have abandoned all reason. Chun smiled, which Sirithka found deeply unsettling. Ambassador, I understand your concern, but please let me explain the full plan before you decide that we are insane. Very well. The Karath Nebula is rich in heavy elements. Exactly the kind of matter that the swarm prioritizes for consumption. If we can draw them there, they will cluster together to feed. And the denser they cluster, the more vulnerable they become to our actual strategy, which is, I will explain that part later for now. The important thing is that we need to evacuate those 800 million people before the swarm arrives. Sirithka felt her patterns shift to a deep purple that signified absolute impossibility. That cannot be done. The logistics alone would require every transport ship in the Concorde running constant cycles for more than a year. And the different species would never cooperate at that level. They barely trust each other enough to share trade routes. Then we will have to change that. What followed was the largest humanitarian operation in the history of the galaxy. And it was organized almost entirely by humans, teams of human diplomats spread out across the Concorde, visiting every species that had people in the threatened systems. And they did not come with demands or ultimatums or threats. They came with spreadsheets. They came with logistics models and evacuation schedules and resource allocation charts. Documents that showed exactly how many people could be saved, and when and how. Documents that broke down an impossible task into thousands of smaller possible tasks. They came with something that the galaxy had never seen before. A species that looked at a problem everyone else had declared unsolvable and simply started solving it. Anyways, Kreth were the first to agree. Won over by a human diplomat named Sarah Eulerin, who spent 3 days in their parliament explaining exactly how their ships could be used most efficiently. The Velerin committed their entire remaining fleet, every transport they had left, and Sirithka personally oversaw the coordination with human logistics teams. The Drath were harder to convince. Their ambassador suspicious of human motives. But when Sarah Eulerin offered to have humans crew the most dangerous evacuation runs, the runs closest to the swarm's projected path, the Drath agreed one by one. Species that had spent centuries treating each other with suspicion and hostility found themselves working together. coordinated by humans who seemed to have an almost supernatural ability to solve scheduling conflicts and resource shortages. And then the humans did something that shocked the entire galaxy. The Velaran ships were too slow there. Faster-than-light drives were older models, efficient but limited, and the evacuation timeline required speeds that they simply could not achieve when this problem was identified. When it seemed like the entire operation might fail because of a technological limitation, the humans offered a solution that no one had expected. They gave away the designs for their new Alcubierre drives, not licensed, not sold, not traded for anything in return, simply given freely and completely to anyone who needed them. You are handing out your greatest technological advantage. The Kreth ambassador sputtered when he heard the news. Your only edge in the galaxy, the one thing that makes you competitive with older species. Why would you do this? Sarah Oilerin looked at him with an expression that he could not read. Because we need your ships to go faster. Because there are children on those worlds. Because this is what we do. The Kreth ambassador did not understand. None of the alien species really understood. But they accepted the gift and upgraded their ships, and the evacuation continued. 12 months past 12 months of constant work. Of ships jumping in and out of threatened systems. Of families being torn from their homes and loaded onto transports. Of human coordinators working around the clock to keep everything running smoothly. There were problems. There were always problems. Equipment failures and communication breakdowns and moments of panic when it seemed like the schedule would collapse. But somehow the humans always found solutions, and slowly, impossibly, the evacuation succeeded. 800 million people moved from 3 star systems to safety. The largest migration in the history of the galaxy. Accomplished through the cooperation of species that had never cooperated before. Organized by a species that had been in space for less than 2 decades when the last transport jumped away from the Karath region, carrying the last refugees to their new temporary homes. Sirith Ka felt something she had not felt since the swarm had first appeared in Velaran space. She felt hope, real hope, not the desperate flutter that had driven her to Earth, but something stronger. Something that told her that maybe, just maybe, these strange humans had actually found a way to win in the shadows of the Karath Nebula, hidden from sensors and far from any shipping lanes. Human engineers were assembling the final pieces of Operation Looking Glass, massive structures, kilometers wide, made from materials that had been borrowed from 6 different species. Ambassador Sirithka had asked General Chun what they were building. Mirrors, he had said. Very large mirrors. She still did not understand what that meant, but she was beginning to trust that the humans knew what they were doing. The Harrow swarm arrived exactly on schedule. General Chun stood on the command deck of the observation station, watching the sensor displays fill with red as trillions of constructs poured into the Karath system like a tide of hungry locusts. He had seen recordings of the swarm before, had studied their movements and their patterns and their terrible efficiency, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of watching them in person. They blotted out the stars, billions upon billions of biomechanical creatures, each one the size of a small car, each one a perfect fusion of organic matter and advanced technology, moving together in waves that stretched across millions of kilometers. They moved with a coordination that should have been impossible, reacting to changes in the environment faster than any signal could travel, shifting their formations in perfect unity, as if they were all controlled by a single mind. Which, in a way, they were. Dior Tanaka had explained it months ago. The quantum entanglement that connected every construct to every other construct. The shared consciousness that allowed them to think and act as one organism across distances that should have made communication impossible. It was beautiful in a horrible way, watching them move. Like watching a murmuration of starlings, except each starling was a killing machine, and there were trillions of them, Swarm density increasing. Dr. Tanaka reported from her station. They are being drawn into the nebula exactly as we predicted. Good, General Chun said. Continue monitoring. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1 was attraction, using carefully placed bait to draw the swarm into the Korath Nebula, where the dense concentrations of heavy elements would keep them focused and clustered. This phase was working perfectly. The swarm was feeding, converting the matter of the nebula into more of themselves, their numbers growing by the minute, their density increasing as they packed closer and closer together to access the richest parts of the cloud on a normal day. In a normal situation, this would have been a disaster. A swarm that was already unstoppable becoming even larger, even more powerful, even more impossible to defeat. But General Chun was not planning a normal strategy, Ambassador, he said, opening a communication channel to the Velaran flagship. How are your people holding up? Suriska's face appeared on his screen, her bioluminescent patterns cycling through colors that his translator identified as anxiety mixed with determination. They are afraid, she admitted. They've been running from the swarm for years, and now you are asking them to watch it feed and grow stronger. Many of them think this is madness. It probably is madness. That is not reassuring. General, Chun allowed himself a small smile. Ambassador, I have learned something about your species in the past year. About all the species of the Concord. Actually, you are all very logical, very rational, very sensible. Is that meant to be an insult? No, just an observation. The problem with being sensible is that you only consider sensible solutions. And the swarm has evolved to defeat sensible solutions, and humans are not sensible. Not always. No, Sirithka's patterns shifted to something the translator could not identify. I hope your insensibility works. General, because if it does not, we are all going to die. Chun nodded. Phase 2, he said. All ships to designated positions, across 9 light minutes of space. The combined fleet of the Galactic Concord began to move. Evelaran cruisers took up positions on the outer edge of the nebula, their upgraded Alcubierre drives humming with power, ready to jump away at a moment's notice if things went wrong. Kreth carriers deployed in a wide arc, their hangars filled with fighter craft that everyone knew would be useless against the swarm, but that were there anyway because the Kreth refused to face any enemy without their warriors' present. Human frigates, small and fast and crewed by volunteers who knew this might be a one-way mission, moved into the most dangerous positions, closest to the swarm, closest to the heart of the plan and the mirror ships. Those massive, ungainly vessels that the Concord species had built to human specifications without ever understanding why, began to unfold their cargo. Kilometers of reflective material stretched out into the void. Sheets of metal and crystal and exotic matter that caught the light of distant stars and bent it according to precise mathematical calculations. What are those? A Kreth commander asked over the fleet communication channel. What are the humans doing? They are building mirrors, Sirithka replied. Very large mirrors. Why? I do not know, but I have learned to trust that they know what they are doing. General Chun watched the mirror deployment on his tactical display, watched as dozens of massive reflectors moved into position around the nebula, forming a pattern that had taken human mathematicians months to calculate. The pattern was designed to do one thing: to capture light from the Korath system's sun and focus it into a single concentrated beam aimed at the heart of the nebula where the swarm was feeding, not as a weapon. The Concord scientists had been very clear that no amount of light or heat could destroy the swarm in meaningful numbers. Their constructs were designed to survive in the vacuum of space, to operate in temperature ranges that would kill any organic life. The light was not meant to destroy them. It was meant to excite them. Dr. Tanaka, General Chun said, explain to the fleet what is about to happen. The xenobiologist nodded and opened a channel to all ships. The Harrow swarm communicates through quantum entanglement, she said. This allows them to coordinate across vast distances, to think as one mind, to react to threats with perfect unity. But quantum communication is extremely sensitive to interference. She pulled up a diagram on the fleet's shared display. When we focus the solar energy into the nebula, we will raise the temperature at the swarm's core by several thousand degrees. This will not destroy them, but it will cause every molecule in their constructs to vibrate with absorbed energy. And that vibration will create noise in their quantum network. Noise, the Kreth commander repeated. Interference. Static, the thing that happens when you try to have a conversation in a crowded room. The swarm will still be able to communicate, but not clearly, not perfectly, not fast enough. And then what? Dr. Tanaka looked at General Chun, who nodded. And then, she said, for the first time in their existence, the Harrow swarm will become individuals. There was silence on the communication channel. Phase 3, General Chun said quietly. All units, look at the sky. The mirrors aligned, the light gathered, and the heart of the Kareth Nebula became a furnace. The light hit the swarm like a hammer made of pure energy. 5 trillion constructs, packed together in the dense heart of the Kareth Nebula, suddenly found themselves bathed in the concentrated output of an entire star. Heat and radiation pouring into their bodies from every direction. They did not burn, they did not melt, they did not die, but something inside them broke. General Chun watched the sensor readings change. Watched the perfect coordination of the swarm begin to fragment. Watched trillions of synchronized movements become chaotic and confused. Quantum coherence dropping. Dr. Tanaka reported, her voice tight with excitement. 40% degradation, 50%, 60%. They are losing contact with each other. On the tactical display, the swarm's formation began to dissolve. The perfect waves of movement becoming ragged and uneven. The flawless unity shattering into something that looked almost random. It is working, Sirith Ka whispered over the communication channel. By all the stars in the sky, it is actually working. But the humans were not celebrating. They knew what came next. 70% degradation, Dr. Tanaka said. 80%, 90%. They are isolated, General. They are completely isolated, for the first time in their existence. The constructs of the Harrow swarm were alone. They had spent millions of years as one organism. One mind, one will, every thought shared instantly with every other construct. Every decision made collectively, every action coordinated perfectly. Now they were individuals, now they were separate. Now they were afraid and fear. For a creature that had never experienced it before, it was a terrible thing. The first construct attacked its neighbor 12 seconds after coherence. Failed completely. Dr. Tanaka had predicted this, and explained it to the War Council months ago, and warned them about what would happen when the swarm's unity broke. They have very simple base programming, she had said. Consume, expand, survive when they are connected. This programming is moderated by collective intelligence. They work together to achieve shared goals. But when they are isolated, when they cannot coordinate, they fall back on their most basic instincts, which are consume everything, expand themselves, survive at any cost, and in an environment where they are surrounded by other constructs, where the only available matter is other constructs. Their instincts will tell them to. She had not finished the sentence. She had not needed to in the tactical display. The swarm was tearing itself apart. 5 trillion constructs. Each one suddenly desperate to survive. Each one programmed to consume any available matter. Each one surrounded by 5 trillion potential meals. They turned on each other with a ferocity that horrified even the Concord veterans who had fought against them for years. Constructs that had moved in perfect, how many moments ago now ripped into each other. breaking down their neighbors for raw materials, growing larger and stronger, even as their numbers dropped by billions. It was not a battle. Battles implied two sides, implied strategy and tactics, and some kind of organized conflict. This was a feeding frenzy, a cascade failure, a civilization ending, threat eating itself alive because it had never learned any other way to exist. The Concorde fleet held position at the edge of the nebula and watched in horrified fascination as the greatest enemy the galaxy had ever known consumed itself. Swarm population dropping, Dr. Tanaka reported, her voice steady but her hand shaking. 4 trillion, 3 trillion, 2 trillion. How long will this continue? The Kreth commander asked. Until there are not enough of them left to sustain the feeding, Dr. Tanaka replied. Our models predict approximately 11 days. 11 days of watching the swarm devour itself. 11 days of silent horror as trillions of constructs died in a chaos of their own making. 11 days of the galaxy holding its breath and wondering if this was really the end. General Chun did not watch all 11 days. He did not need to. The second day, when the swarm's numbers had dropped below 1 trillion, he retired to his quarters and slept for the first time in weeks. He dreamed of nothing when he woke. Dea Tanaka was waiting for him with a report. It is over, she said. How many survived? Less than 0.1%. Scattered fragments, too damaged to reunite. Too few to threaten anyone. They are fleeing into deep space. And they will never recover. General Chan nodded slowly. Contact Ambassador Sirithka, he said. Tell her the war is over. The Treaty of Kareth was signed 6 months later in a ceremony attended by representatives of every species in the Galactic Concord. Ambassador Sirithka spoke first, her bioluminescent patterns cycling through colors of gratitude and wonder as she described what humanity had done for her people, the Kreth commander who had questioned the mirror strategy publicly apologized for his doubts and declared humans to be honorary warriors of his people. Species that had spent centuries in cold conflict found themselves standing together, united by the shared experience of watching the impossible become possible, and humanity was formally elevated to senior advisory status in the Concord, a position that had never existed before, created specifically because no existing category fit what they had become. Not the strongest species, not the most advanced, not the oldest or the wisest, something else, something new, something that looked at impossible problems and simply refused to accept that they were impossible. In her speech at the treaty signing, Secretary General Okonko tried to explain what had happened, tried to put into words what humanity had done and why they had done it. We are a young species, she said, and we have made many mistakes in our short history. We have fought wars among ourselves. We have damaged our own planet. We have done terrible things to each other in the name of progress and power and fear. She paused and looked around the assembly hall at the dozens of alien species who had come to honor humanity. But we have also done this. We have looked at a problem that everyone said was unsolvable, and we have solved it anyway. We have faced an enemy that everyone said was unbeatable, and we have beaten it anyway. We have taken our chaos and our unpredictability and our refusal to give up, and we have turned them into weapons. She smiled. The galaxy told us that the swarm was unstoppable, and we asked for a second opinion. The galaxy told us that 800 million people could not be evacuated, and we evacuated them anyway. The galaxy told us that we were too young and too primitive and too strange to make a difference. And we made a difference anyway. She looked directly at Ambassador Sirithka. You asked us for help. And we helped you, not because we are special or superior or chosen, but because this is what we do, this is who we are. When someone needs help, we help them. When something seems impossible, we try anyway. The assembly hall was silent. You asked us to look at the sky, she said. And we did? and we found a way to fill it with light. Years later, when Valoran historians wrote their accounts of the Swarm War, they struggled to find the right words to describe what humanity had done in the end. They settled on a human phrase that Ambassador Serifka had learned during her time on Earth. When the universe tells humanity that something is impossible, she wrote, humanity asks for a second opinion. The galaxy had given them that second opinion, and humanity had answered with light. The end.